Today I'd like to address a question that was asked in an earlier video. A friend by the name of Dean Thornquist asked, "I'd love to see a video on mentalism books for the beginner." Mentalism books for the beginner. I'm going to address that question. There's another question that I had in another video. A viewer said, "Would you please use a lavalier or some other kind of external microphone because it'll make the sound so much better." I'm looking into that. It's not an easy fix for me, but I'm looking into it. I'll take care of it. Hopefully we can increase the audio quality. But getting back to Dean's question, he wanted to know, he wanted recommendations, books for the beginning mentalist. And I gave that a lot of thought. You know, I've been doing mentalism for at least 20 years. Just to give you a little bit of background, I started doing traditional magic. I started doing birthday parties and that sort of thing. And I wanted to be an illusionist, so I began to acquire larger and larger effects, began to do bigger and bigger shows. A friend of the family, Jill Kennard, came into the show. She worked with me for 11 years. We did, I thought, was a good illusion show, a good illusion act. But in 1998, she decided that she wanted to step out of performing, concentrate on her family. That's what she did, and I had to look for another way to perform. At first, I ran ads in the local papers, and I tried to attract someone to take her place. Jill was irreplaceable for me. I was not able to replace her, and so I started looking for other ways to perform. Now, going way back to when I was a kid, and I would go down to the Yogi Magic Mart and spend time with Phil Thomas down there. I was interested in mentalism back then, and this was really pre-Doug Henning. So Doug Henning was a big influence on me. But back in those days, I was interested in mentalism, and Phil told me, you know, you're not right for mentalism. You're too young. Wait until you're older because there's more credibility when you're older. Well, you know, I saw a mentalist, and I should have done some research, and I should have gotten her name. I'll try to find the link and put it below. But I saw a mentalist on one of the talent shows. I think it's America's Got Talent. I think that was the one. And she's a little girl, and she was maybe 9, 10 years old, maybe. And she was fantastic. So let me tell you something. Mentalism works. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how young you are. There are absolutely no restrictions. But I decided to turn my attention to mentalism in 1998. And I started studying back then. I think I did my first show as a mentalist. Maybe, it was probably not until 2000. I had a rough year in 1999. I was ill. But I came back, and I think it was the year 2000 that I started doing mentalism performances semi-professionally. And I remember that first show. I was using the tossed out deck. I was using a lot of very standard mentalist type effects, and it was very well received. I was extremely well received, and I started doing the question and answer portion. Many mentalists believe that the question and answer is the heart and soul of mentalism. And there are many good books and many good references on how to do a question and answer act. I actually do the Q&A sometimes, and I don't do it other times. So I can do an hour to an hour and a half without ever doing a Q&A. But I know for McCambridge and for Osterlind and for a lot of other people, the question and answer is the heart and soul of their act. And certainly for Anna Eva Fay, who is one of my great heroes, she did a Q&A also. So it's a big part of the act. But the question is that Dean asked, and Dean, thank you so much for asking. And by the way, I love questions. I love comments. So please comment down below, ask questions. It could be about anything. I will address the questions. Somebody earlier asked about John Northern Hilliard in the Lost Notebooks. I did a video on that. So this is Dean. This is his question. He wants to know about books, mentalism books for the beginning mentalist. I gave it a lot of thought. I'm going to share some of my thoughts, and they're probably not going to be, Dean, it might not be what you want to hear. It might not be, because I know what you're looking for. I really do. You're looking for a bare bones book on mentalism. I get it. I know what you're looking for. Mentalism, in my opinion, is not a beginner branch of magic. And by the way, I'm going to get into a lot of tangents here because it's so important to understand where I'm coming from as a mentalist, and that's what I am today. I'm a mentalist. When I'm dealing with an end user, with a potential customer, I describe myself as a magician who specializes in mentalism or mind reading. I say it exactly that way. I'm a magician who specializes in mentalism or mind reading. I say that for a lot of reasons. First of all, I want to establish that I'm a magician. I don't want there to be I don't come out and explicitly say I'm not psychic. I don't say that. Neither do I say that I am. I say I'm a magician, and I hope that it's understood that what I'm doing is a branch of magic. And then I say I'm a mentalist. Now, most people outside of the world of magic, most people don't know what a mentalist is. And so that's why I say or mind reading. So it's very important. But I say that mentalism is not for beginners because to be a successful mentalist, you have to be a very good actor. And that is not a beginner skill. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about conviction and where conviction comes from and how to bring that to your performance, because that's what makes mentalism authentic, is your ability to portray it as authentic. If you don't believe it's authentic, if you don't have that conviction coming out of you, it's very hard to be a successful mentalist without being also a very good actor. The other thing is you need a high level of comfort with risk, because as a mentalist, you're going to be doing some things that are not surefire. You're going to be, Richard Osterlind speaks at length on the idea of scripting. As a magician, you're probably used to scripting your routines and following a script and blocking certain things out so that your movements are choreographed. As a mentalist, you don't have that most of the time because you're interacting with your audience almost all the time. So the audience response to what you're doing and your response to them is the heart and soul of mentalism, and that cannot be scripted. Now you have to rehearse your techniques, your whatever it is you're doing needs to be polished to perfection, but that's not the same as writing a script, memorizing a script, choreographing an illusion, walking through the choreography. It's just not the same. So it requires a high level of acting skill, and it requires a comfort with that kind of almost jazz approach. I'm not saying that you're doing it on the fly, although a lot of mentalists do, but I am saying that it's highly interactive, and you have to have the skills to get up in front of an audience and interact with them back and forth in order to be a success in mentalism. Now, beyond that, there's a certain ideology that I have that other performers do not, and I'm not going to speak for all mentalists. I'm only speaking for myself. Personally, I believe in ESP. I believe in the tenets of spiritualism. So for me to bring a certain level of conviction to what I'm doing is easy because I already believe in it. Now let me tell you a story. I do an effect right now. I'm always evolving my show. I'm always changing things that I do. But at the moment, I'm doing a padlock effect. Now, there's 4 digits in this particular lock. And the way that I do it is throughout the course of the show, I'm trying to project a number into the mind of an audience member. The audience member gives me the number. I write it on a chalkboard. At the end of the show, I key in those numbers in a padlock and it opens. So the effect is that I have successfully projected a number into the minds of 4 members of the audience. Now here's what happened in a show very recently. It was in August. And this is September, by the way, so this was in August. I'm doing a show, and I always do this kind of thing because I think it adds to the authenticity of what you're doing. I genuinely project a number into the minds of my audience. In other words, I have a number in my mind that I'm trying to project. 4 digits. The first three of the 4 digits that I was projecting were accurate. In other words, I was projecting a 2, they got a 2. I was projecting a 7, they got a 7. I was projecting a 6, they got a 6. 3 in a row. I'm already thinking this is great. You know, I'm loving it because it's genuine. We're into the numbers on the board. I get to the last one, and it was a younger person in the audience. I knew the person wanted to participate, but they hadn't been able to up to that point. I was getting to the end of the show, so I decided to use that person. The person was confused. They weren't sure what I was trying to do. They weren't comfortable necessarily with receiving telepathic information. They'd never done it before, never attempted to do it before. So the person gives me a number, and it's not the correct number. Now, it didn't make any difference because the lock opens anyway. But it's not the correct number. So after the show, a woman comes up to speak to me, and she says to me, you know, David, 3 of those numbers, the first 3 numbers, were correct. The last number was not. And yet, you opened the lock. Now, this is a member of the audience. So here's my point. She successfully received, even though she wasn't one of the 4 that I called on, she successfully received all 4 digits. Not only did she do that, but she knew that the final digit was incorrect. Now, you can make any explanation you want to. You can say it was coincidence. Say anything you want. I think it was genuine telepathy. And so that's where I'm coming from as a performer, as a mentalist. Let me take. I may be the first to say this. I think Kenton Nepper probably advocates the similar thing. Possibly Jeff McBride. But let me go out on a limb here and suggest almost a new branch of magic. I call myself, not to laymen, I will never say this to a layman, but to other magicians, I would describe myself as a sacramental performer. And what I mean by that is when I perform, it's an outward representation of an inner conviction. You see, I believe in what I'm doing. And so when I perform it, even though it's an illusion, it represents something that I believe in. And so it takes on a sacramental quality in that regard. And this is the kind of ideological discussion you get into when you move toward mentalism and away from traditional magic. You have to decide, what kind of mentalist am I going to be? What kind of conviction do I have? What are my real beliefs? Because when you move into this area, let me tell you something else. This is another digression. So I'm doing the show, and the host, this is the guy that's booked me, this is the guy that's writing my check. Okay, the host comes up to me and says, I'm going to go out, I'm going to tell people that you're the real thing. Now, listen, I'm very uncomfortable with that. I'm uncomfortable with lying, okay? Magicians do not lie. They're entertainers, they're actors. They don't lie any more than Laurence Olivier lies when he portrays Hamlet. But I'm not going to misrepresent what I'm doing. So a couple of stories. So this guy says, you're the real thing, I'm going to tell people you're the real thing. I said, you know what, I'm not comfortable with it. He said, that's what I'm going to do, and you better live up to it. So that was very uncomfortable for me, and it made me reinforce. This is one of the reasons why I introduce myself as a magician who specializes in mentalism or mind reading, because I'm emphasizing the fact that what I'm doing is an illusion. Again, you get into this philosophical debate about how much do you disclose? What do you disclose? I don't think it's appropriate to go out in front of an audience when you're doing a performance in mentalism and say, hey, this is all a bunch of tricks. You know, it's not appropriate. And first of all, it's not entirely true. Because when I perform, it's not. I'm attempting to do some real things. And I won't get into that, but I'm attempting to do that, as I mentioned. On the other hand, I'm not presenting myself as a genuine psychic. I'm not doing it. and I resent and I don't like it when somebody does. So that's another ideological element that you need to deal with. So let me tell you another story. So I'm doing a Q&A. And Q&A is very strong. Q&A basically, there's lots of different ways to do it. The way I like to do it was with billets. So I hand out billets. Audience members write questions that they don't know the answer to. On the billet, they fold it up. And I'm able to essentially read their mind and answer their question. That's the basics of a Q&A. And on this particular evening, it was just, I mean, Q&As, again, it depends on audience interaction. Sometimes they're amazing, and sometimes, you're just not getting anywhere because it depends on your interaction. With this particular evening, it was stunning. I was hitting all over the place, faces were lighting up. It was stunning. And so afterward, it was the kind of audience situation in which there was room for some interaction afterward, and somebody asked me point blank, is this genuine? Is this real? And of course, I have convictions about it. I'm not going to. So I said, you know what? No, it's not. And I said that to the entire audience because I was asked point blank. And there was real disappointment on the faces of those audience members. There was real letdown. And that concerned me too. So I try to do that groundwork coming in so people know where I'm coming from. But when I say sacramental, I mean that I believe in it. I mean that this is an outward illusion. It's an outward representation of something that I truly believe in. And so the emotional response, whether it's an illusion or whether it's real, is essentially the same. Now, another question that you have to ask and answer, and I'm going to make a distinction here that some performers do not make. There's a difference between mental magic and mentalism. And you ask 10 mentalists what the difference is, and you'll probably get 10 answers, 10 different answers. I'm going to offer you mine. Mental magic is not well defined. It's a magic trick. It's essentially got a magic element to it that mentalism doesn't have. Mentalism, on the other hand, is intentional. You are intentionally representing telepathy, or you're intentionally representing clairvoyance, or you're intentionally representing divination. So you have a very clear purpose in mind when you're presenting in mentalism. And most of the time it has to do with telepathy, either one way or the other. I like to project images into the mind of my audience and have them responding to me so that they're the ones who are feeling like they're receiving. I think it's much more the conviction on their part, and their emotional investment is greater when we do that. So I really like to do that. But you really have to begin to discern between mental magic and mentalism. I'm not going to delve into it too much now because I want to devote some time to other things. Now, Dean, back to your question. I'd like to see a video on mentalism books for the beginner. I said all that to lead up to the point that I want to make, which is mentalism is not for the beginner, and the books that I'm going to recommend, while I believe they're books for the beginning mentalist, are books that I think the average magician might struggle with. First book, 13 Steps to Mentalism. You probably knew it, right? You knew it. Now there are other books that are less challenging. For example, you can pick up your Tarbell course. Pick up your Tarbell course. 8 volumes, right? 8 volumes. And in most volumes there is there's a section on mentalism. You can pick up your Tarbell books and you can read some of this material. By the way, there is available to you today something that was never available to me when I was learning, and that is Dan Harland. Dan Harland has taken the mentalism sections, as well as every other section in the Tarbell series, and he has devoted a complete 2-3 hour video to lessons on mentalism. I have in my collection of Dan Harland's work, I'm guessing now, but I probably have 10, maybe 10 videos, video lessons on mentalism alone. So you can get a lot of material between the Tarbell books and the Dan Harland videos. By the way, the Dan Harland videos are available from Penguin Magic. So I'll try to put the links below. You can go there. You can search out the material on mentalism. You can, by the way, if you buy, I think it's 10 videos at a time, you can get it for $10 a piece. So that's a really good investment. The videos are generally between 2 and 3 hours each. And what I like about what Dan does, he doesn't just do the trick in the book. He brings a lot of his experience to it, and so he develops the effect beyond what it is in the book. So I would highly recommend that to you if you're getting started. Go ahead and take a look at that material. I'll put the links below. But the very first book, if you're serious about progressing as a mentalist, you need to read 13 Steps to Mentalism by Corinda. You need to study each lesson. You need to learn each lesson, and you need to apply the principles. Now I'm flipping through the book here. You can see how I've highlighted pretty much every page. And by the way, the appropriate approach, I think, to the study of mentalism, as to any field of magic, is to receive this material as principles. If you're looking in here for your act, you probably won't find it. If you look in here for principles that you can develop into an act, you're going to be very happy, because that's what you're going to find here. Now again, when I started, I read this book from cover to cover, and I tried to put into practice every single lesson. I tried to do that. Today, you have this. This is a DVD instructional by Richard Osterlind, 13 Steps to Mentalism. You get to see these effects performed before a live audience, and then you get Richard Osterlind's commentary on the effects and on the methodology in this DVD series. I highly recommend that to you. By the way, I'm going to talk a lot about Richard Osterlind today. He's a personal hero to me. When I was beginning, I didn't actually start reading the 13 Steps. The first thing I did, now I'm trying to remember now, this was back in 98, 99, 2000. So maybe I did start here. Maybe I did start with Animate. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, because I think these came out a bit later. These might have been, well, this is 2004, right? So it had to be much later that I came across these, but these are dynamite. Now, if you're familiar with card magic, you probably know Michael Amar. He did a series called Easy to Master Card Miracles. I don't know how many volumes, maybe 12 volumes, 14 volumes in that series. Michael Amar established himself as an expert in the area of card magic. And he did this series of videos that if you're interested in card magic, you need to pick these up. Same thing here. If you are a beginning mentalist, you need to pay attention to Richard Osterlind. I recommend him to you for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's a great teacher. First and foremost, he's a great teacher. But ideologically, I think he's coming from the right space. You know, I think as a mentalist, he really believes in the mystery of it, and creating that atmosphere where that belief takes place, and where it gives credibility to mentalism. You know, without that, if you take that away from mentalism, you lose a lot of the performance art impact of mentalism. So you really need to learn from the best. Richard Osterlind is the best. He's done a number of series. He did this, 13 Steps. Did this series, Easy to Master Mental Miracles. Now I know, Dean, you're probably thinking, I asked for books. I got 3 books here. There are other books certainly on this subject. But we're living in a video age. And here's the pros and cons. Now, Denny Haney used to tell me, read a book, David. Don't watch the video, read the book. And here's why. You're going to see a performance style here. You're going to see the idiosyncrasies of Richard Osterlind. Now, the danger is that you're going to imitate Richard Osterlind. You're going to do his presentation verbatim. You're going to dress like him. You're going to use the chalkboard that he uses. You're going to do that sort of thing, and that's always the risk when it comes to video learning, because you're not just getting the effect, you're getting an interpretation. So let me just caution you at the beginning. Don't do that. Don't do that. Read the books. Read 13 Steps, but also watch this, because there's lots of material on here that are not in 13 Steps, that is not in Practical Mental Effects. I'll get to that in a second. But this is the series that I recommend the most. If you're a beginning mentalist, there are, I believe, 4 volumes. Easy to Master Mental Miracles by Richard Osterlind. You cannot go wrong. I highly recommend it to you. 13 Steps we talked about. Let me talk for a moment about Animan. If you're a beginning mentalist, or if you're an advanced mentalist, or any level of mentalist, you better know who Animan is. Take a look back here. You've probably seen this on other videos. Animan, the Jinx. And there's a new book out that I'm going to be reviewing, The Complete Animan, and I've been reading that. I'm working my way through it, and it is stunning. I'm going to devote an entire video to that book, but this is Practical Mental Effects by Animan. Now, basically what they did was they went through the Jinx, which was his magazine, and they culled out the very best material, and they put it into this book form. And so if you want to study mentalism, these are the books right here that you cannot be without. 13 Steps to Mentalism and Practical Mental Effects. So you must have it. Now, guess what else, folks? Guess what else? Again, I read this book cover to cover, and learned much of the material in here, and still use it today. But our friend Osterlind produced the series, and the series is Practical Mental Effects, Performance and Instruction by Richard Osterlind. So this is a 6-volume set, 6 volumes, taking material out of Animan's vast reservoir of material and presenting it again to a live audience. Again, I didn't have this when I was working my way through the material. You do, and you should take advantage of it. I talked about the disadvantage of video learning. Understand that, but it's available to you, and I would certainly avail yourself of this opportunity. The other series is Richard Osterlind's Mind Mystery series. I believe there are 7 videos in this series. This particular volume, volume 1, says The Act. This is basically the act, or at least a portion of it, that Osterlind does. You watch this, watch his act, and you'll see what mentalism can be. And Richard does a wonderful job. By the way, Richard Osterlind has his own website, his own marketing branch, and he has many, many more products available. I'll put the link below so you can take a look at his material. Dean, I hope this answered your question. I know what you might have been looking for. By the way, in Mark Wilson's Complete Course in Magic, he does have a chapter on mentalism. You're bordering there on mental magic as opposed to mentalism. See, a lot of the beginner books, How to Do Magic for Dummies, that has a section on mentalism. A lot of those sections on mentalism in the beginner books are really mental magic. They're really not mentalism. Mentalism is a philosophy as much as it is as a performance art branch of magic. It's also a philosophical or an ideological point of view. And so, in thinking about your question, Dean, I try to take that into account, and to me, if you're going to move into the direction of mentalism, you should start out correctly. You know, if you're studying material that is basically mental magic and calling it mentalism, you're not going to get where you need to go as a mentalist if you're going to specialize in this branch. So that's why 13 steps and practical mental effects. When you say recommend beginner books, these are not beginner books, I admit, but for a mentalist, they are. They're foundational if you decide this is the branch of magic you want to go into. I said a lot of controversial things. I understand that, and please comment. Give me your point of view. I realize that maybe the majority, possibly the majority, are not going to agree with some of the things I just said, and that's okay too. Everybody has an opinion, and that's fine. Comment below, subscribe, please. Love to have you subscribe, love to have you comment. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. Dean, thank you for asking the question, and I'll see you next time.